Okay, I think we're all set and ready to roll this evening. So I think we got everything set here. Just trying to make sure everything's ready to roll and ready to chat with you tonight about pretty much, about what's going on in Utah politics, what's happening up on Utah's Capitol Hill, and anything else that you want to talk about that's happening in Utah politics. Give everybody a few minutes to join in. I'm sure people will be cycling in and out. Tried to do this one a little bit later, give more people a chance to join us this evening. But welcome, everybody. My name is Brian Schott. I am an independent journalist. I've been covering Utah politics for more than 25 years. And I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You can find my work at utahpolitics.news. You can also follow me on any of these platforms. We are live tonight on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. But this is sort of an hour for me to answer your questions, talk about what's happening again in Utah politics. There's a lot happening up on the Hill. They're moving the bills to radically reshape Utah's judiciary through the process. We can talk about that and what that means for you. We can talk about what's happening with the effort to overturn or put a repeal of Proposition 4 on November's ballot. I've been crunching the numbers on that every single day, and I know I keep saying this, but the math is just not good for them right now. They've got 19 days to turn in signatures, probably less than 19 as it is right now. But they've only got they don't have much longer to turn in signatures. They've got 18 days. Sorry, I was off on my calendar for a little bit, and they still haven't gotten half of the signatures that they need, which is, if you think about it, kind of embarrassing. They're not even halfway there, and they've been doing this for a while. But you can follow my updates on any of these social channels, primarily TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Threads and Facebook. We can interact there. Or you can go to my website, utahpolitics.news. And if you're wondering what Utah Politics is, Utah Political Watch, well, it is journalist-owned, journalist-operated news outlet. There's no corporations. There's no billionaires who are telling me what I can and can't write. And I am entirely funded by my readers. Entirely funded by subscribers, so I'm only accountable to them. And I'm going to show this again. I showed this during the last one. I was kind of excited about it, but I just got these printed out. These are a little swag for my current subscribers. A few of them have already asked me for them, but I got these stickers. Let me see if I can get this centered here. Right there. Make it so I can hold it correctly. But these stickers say, corporate media sucks, support independent journalism, and then it's got my logo. I think this is a great little laptop sticker. If you want one of those, you can become a subscriber at utahpolitics.news. Okay, that's enough of my pitch. I'm not going to spend the whole night asking you to support what I do. If you want to support what I do, you can go to my website. I've got a tip jar. You can become a subscriber, whatever. And, all right, let's get straight into it. People are already asking questions about the bills taking on Utah's judiciary up on Utah's Capitol Hill. The first one, Senate Bill 134, that one expands the Utah Supreme Court. That one was in a House committee earlier today. And I'm pulling up just the status so I have the numbers in front of me. But that is Senate Bill 134. That one is sponsored by Senator Chris Wilson. It was in a House committee today, and unsurprisingly, it did pass the House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee by a 7-2 vote. 2 people abstained. That is going to add 2 justices to the Utah Supreme Court. Now, you're hearing House Speaker Mike Schultz, Senate President Stuart Adams, and Governor Spencer Cox say that they need to do this and because there's just too much of a workload on the Supreme Court. But it is curious that they're moving to do this after the Supreme Court has ruled against them on a couple of things. And so maybe they want to pack the court and add a reasonable person could surmise that they want to pack the court and put more people on there who might rule in their favor. So they moved that through a House committee today. That means it's probably going to pass the House by the end of the week. It's already been through the Senate. Just needs one vote on the House floor. It'll go on to the main House calendar tomorrow, Thursday. Expect a final vote on Friday. If it passes in the House with 2/3 vote, it's already passed in the Senate and 2/3 vote. If it passes in the House with a 2/3 vote, then it will it becomes effective immediately on the governor's signature. I'm seeing a comment on the Instagram from Kay Sundog. Kate, why don't you drop me a DM or an email? My email, it's all over the website, or you can just drop me a DM and we can chat. I'd love to have that talk with you. But thank you for the offer. I appreciate that. So that bill moved forward today, and I'm going to tell a little story. I'm sort of taking a victory lap here because something really funny, at least to me, happened with that bill, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I did do a video about it, a kind of cheeky video on Instagram and TikTok, but I'll tell the story because it's really funny. But then there's another bill, and Nathan Detroit on Twitch, he's watching there tonight. He asks about the Constitutional Court. Will it be appealable to the Supreme Court of Utah? Yes, I believe so. I think it's just a new court to sort of speed up the process. And if you're wondering what Nathan, who is one of our subscribers at utahpolitics.news, what he is talking about is a bill that dropped. It literally dropped yesterday. HB 392 from Representative Matt McPherson, and it creates a brand new court in the Utah justice system. And what this does is it sets up what's called a constitutional court. So anytime there is a challenge to one of Utah's laws on constitutional grounds, instead of it going through the normal court process, instead of it going to a state district court, it would immediately go to this constitutional court. The constitutional court is made up of 3 justices, and when they make big decisions, they would have to sit what is called en banc, or en banc. I think it's pronounced en banc, meaning all 3 of them would have to vote. So essentially, you need to get 2 of the 3 justices on your side. And this would be the case anytime that there is a challenge to a law on constitutional grounds. A really good example is the gerrymandering case that is still going on in the courts. That was challenged on constitutional grounds. Instead of going to a regular judge like this one did, it would then go to this new constitutional court. The justices would be appointed by the governor. The governor would it also creates a brand new panel of people appointed by the governor who would come up with nominees for the positions on this court. Obviously, they would need to nominate 3 people at the beginning, but then they would come up with, like, I think 7 nominees anytime that there's a vacancy on this court. And that's different than the way they do courts now. There's a judicial nominating commission, and they come up with recommendations. So this would completely take this new court out of that process. And they would hear any challenges to state law on constitutional grounds. But there's also another part of this, that the legislature or the attorney general would have the power to yank a case out of the regular court process. Say it's in a district court. If it is, and I'm looking at the language here, it would be a case of significant public importance. They would have the ability to yank that case out of whatever court it's in and move it to this constitutional court. There are no guidelines on what counts as significant. The bill does not say. It only says that a significant public importance means that it would affect, quote, a significant number of the citizens of Utah. So they're creating this new court. Kathy on Instagram says, every lawyer, attorney, law professor, and Utah State Bar attorney spoke eloquently against it, and yes, it was passed out of committee. I believe she's talking about the Supreme Court bill. But yes, the legislature, the Republican legislature, they are doing some change. They're going to make some radical changes to the court system here in Utah, and these things are a priority for leadership, so they're pretty much going to pass. That's how this is going to work. So they're creating a brand new court to hear constitutional challenges that they can also pull significant cases out of. And they're going to be adding 2 justices to the Utah Supreme Court. Nathan Detroit says, how does adding justices reduce the Supreme Court workload? I get that it's probably a BS excuse, but you think they'd at least have a plausible argument. Well, if you look at the numbers, the Supreme Court of Utah has actually been deciding more cases. And there's a case to be made that adding justices to the process would slow things down, because instead of 5 people having to rule on an issue, now you've got 7. Now, one of the things that they're talking about is it reduces the Supreme Court workload, and they said it would also bring Utah in line with other states of similar size, and their Supreme Court has 7 members, not 5. So that's what they're trying to do with this bill. I think the Constitutional Court, when that bill dropped, and it dropped all of a sudden, like it showed up yesterday afternoon and it was already in a committee today. Meaning they were sitting on this thing and they're ready to just push it through. And I believe it did pass through committee today. Let me double check that. Get those numbers. Yeah, it did pass through the House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee. It was on the same committee that heard the Supreme Court bill. It also passed 7-2 with 2 absent on the vote. So this one's going to pass as well. So we're going to have 2 new Supreme Court justices. That bill will go into effect immediately. I don't know if they're going to have time. There's a lot of people who are talking about immediately making, since the Supreme Court expansion bill goes into effect immediately, that they would be able to get a couple of justices in place while the appeal over the new congressional maps are happening. I think that would be a real tough ask, because they are fighting against the deadline of candidate filing starting the second week of March, like right after the legislature. The legislature, I believe, ends on March 6th, and then candidate filing for Congress opens on the 9th. Now, I suppose that they could try to move that again, but it would be really, really hard, because we've already set the dates for caucus night. We've already set the dates for the primary, unless they decide they want to move the primary. There was a lot of moving pieces, so I don't think that it doesn't feel to me like there's a path to getting 2 new Supreme Court justices on the court in order to hear this appeal. But that's where we are. And if you have any questions about that, any comments, anything that it's on your mind you want to chat about, go ahead and leave it in the chat. We're live on multiple platforms tonight, and I'll try to get to your comments as soon as possible. Let me tell you a little story about that Supreme Court packing bill. And I wrote about this the other morning, and then something extremely funny to me, it may not be funny to everyone, but it was funny to me, happened with that. So I was going through, I was watching the House do their floor time on Monday, and the bill to expand the Supreme Court, SB 134, came over from the Senate. Now, typically, when a bill comes over from the Senate, or when a bill crosses from one chamber to the other, there are communications from that chamber. So the Senate gets communications from the House gets communications from the Senate. That's where they learn that the bill has been passed, and then the bill is in the possession of the House or the Senate. The bill comes over from the Senate to the House in this case, then it goes to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee they decide which committee the bill gets assigned to. So they did send it to the Rules Committee, but then something weird happened. And I think, I've been doing this for so long that when stuff like this happens, it gets my attention because they're doing it for a reason. But the bill, it goes to the Rules Committee, but then immediately Representative Jordan Tusher, who is the chair of the Rules Committee, gets up and makes a motion to move the bill, to lift the bill from the Rules Committee. So he makes a motion from the floor to lift the bill from the Rules Committee and move it to a standing committee. And normally bills, when they go to a standing committee, they go to what is called a subject matter committee. And in this case, you would think that the Supreme Court bill addressing the number of justices on the Supreme Court would go to, the House Judiciary Committee. It was on the Senate Judiciary Committee when they heard it. But that's not what happened. They lifted it from Rules and put it in the House Business and Labor Committee. Okay, so that's weird. And that got my antenna twitching. Again, like I've said, I've been covering Utah politics long enough that when they do something like that, there's a reason behind it, and you should probably pay attention to it. So they lift this bill to expand the Supreme Court from Rules and send it to the House Business and Labor Committee. Now, the reason for doing that wasn't to speed up the process, because they got it moved over to House Business and Labor, and they didn't do it in time to add it to the agenda for the Tuesday hearing for House Business and Labor. So it would have to wait until Friday. So they didn't do that to speed up the process. Sometimes they will send it to a committee that's not a subject matter committee to speed up the process, but that's not what happened here. They moved it to a committee that was going to meet on Friday. So that's number two. That's the second thing that doesn't smell right to me. So I start looking into it. And wouldn't you know it, the House Business and Labor Committee is one of the few committees that House Speaker Mike Schultz sits on. And it is very, very unusual for the Speaker of the House to attend a committee hearing. Mike Schultz was elected Speaker in the fall of 2023 after Brad Wilson stepped down to run for Senate. His first session as Speaker was the 2024 session. And since 2024, his first session as Speaker, he has only attended 5 committee hearings. And most of the time, they were to hear bills that were a priority to him, something that was on his radar. The one time that really stood out to me was in 2024, when Representative Kira Birkeland's bathroom bill, the one that limited access to bathrooms and locker rooms in public buildings for transgender people, when that came up in committee. It came up in the Business and Labor Committee. Probably should have come up in government ops or education, but they moved it to Business and Labor. And that's a committee that Schultz sits on, and that was an issue that was very important to him that session. And wouldn't you know it, that bill is the last bill on the agenda for that day, and he rolls in right as that bill comes up for consideration, takes his seat, votes on it, votes down a couple of amendments, votes in favor of a friendly amendment, votes it out of committee, and then he leaves. And that got my attention because that usually doesn't happen, but it is a strong signal that this is something the Speaker wants. So that was on Monday. And on Tuesday morning, I wrote about this in my newsletter, saying that it's strange that they moved it to Business and Labor. And one of the reasons why is maybe Mike Schultz, it's a committee that he sits on and he wants to vote on it in committee. And then on 3 hours after I wrote that article, on the House floor, Speaker Schultz invokes this very obscure House rule. It was so obscure that he didn't, he stumbled. If you watch the video, he stumbles through as he reads which rule he's invoking that gives the Speaker the ability to unilaterally move a bill from one committee to another. And he gets up and he says, as per House rule, whatever, the Speaker is lifting this bill from business and labor and moving it to criminal justice and law enforcement. And that happened 3 hours after I wrote an article pointing this out. Are they connected? I don't know. But the timing sure as hell is weird, right? That timing is really strange that I write this article saying, hey, maybe they did this weird, funky legislative parliamentary maneuver for this reason. And then 3 hours later, the Speaker lifts the bill from that committee and moves it to another committee. And I find that really funny because, as you know, I am currently in a lawsuit with the Utah legislature because they refuse to issue me a press credential. I am the only reporter they will not give a press credential to. They claim it is because, well, they changed their rules to say that independent media and bloggers are not eligible to have a press credential. But I'm the only person that this applies to. I'm the only person who's singled out. They didn't give me one last year. They again didn't give me one this year. So for some reason, I'm not getting a press credential because I'm not legitimate media, but they sure do pay attention to what I have to say. And I found that really interesting, that I write this article and then 3 hours later, Schultz invokes this really esoteric rule on the House floor, this obscure rule to move a bill from one committee to another. So there's that. SLC guy. Okay, well, let's get to this one. SLC guy says, do you have any new updates on the Prop 4, the anti-Prop 4 initiative signatures? That is the ballot initiative from Utahns for Representative Government, which is just the Utah Republican Party leadership. That's their political issue committee that's running this. They're currently collecting signatures to try and put a repeal of Prop 4, which is the anti-gerrymandering law that was approved by voters in 2018. They want to put that repeal on the ballot in November. I've been tracking the numbers every single day, breaking down, trying to do some math, trying to figure out where they'll end up, what pace they need to hit. They had a good day today. It was the number of signatures they added to their total with the numbers that were released this morning. It was their best day in a week. They added 2,524 verified signatures this morning, which is Wednesday morning. That's a 52% jump over the prior day. We also saw them make some improvement in the district in a number of Senate districts where signatures are lagging. The bad news is, even though today was a good day for them, overall, it's still not enough. They need more signatures. They need a massive increase in the rate of collecting, turning in signatures, being verified to have a chance to get this thing on the ballot. Because they have to hit two goals. And I've explained this before. The first one is statewide. They have to get 140,748 signatures statewide from registered voters. They've been collecting signatures for 70 days, somewhere around that, since sometime in December, early December, and maybe earlier than that. My math is off, but we've been seeing signature totals roll in since December 11th. And they're not even halfway to that statewide goal. They're sitting right now at 43.78%. That's their statewide progress. And that is not good. That, frankly, that's kind of embarrassing. They should be embarrassed with the amount of money that they are spending on this effort. They should be embarrassed that they are not even at halfway yet. Now, they do have until February 15th to turn in the signatures. That is a Sunday, but they're going to have to turn them in, and the clerks have been notified they have to be available to accept these signature packets on Sunday, the 15th. But that's the last day, and they are not even at 50% yet. They still need almost 80,000 verified signatures just to hit that statewide goal. So that's the first thing they need to do. But even if they hit that statewide goal, it's looking very much like they're going to fall short because they will not get enough signatures with the geographic requirement that legislatures put in. They also have to get signatures from 8% of registered voters in 26 of Utah's 29 Senate districts. And right now, they've only crossed the finish line in one Senate district. Again, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculously inefficient. And I said that they've spent a lot of money on this. Yeah, $4.35 million they've pumped into this so far. For comparison, the referendum effort last year against the union busting bill, the one that was organized by a coalition of labor groups, they had a shorter amount of time to collect the same number of signatures. I think they had 45 days to collect their signatures, and they did it in 23, and they at least doubled, maybe even got close to tripling the statewide amount. They ended up with over 251,000 verified signatures. Organizers said they turned in 320. So, the clerks stopped verifying when it was clear that they were going to make the ballot. And they have people still out there verifying collecting signatures, and they're getting paid a lot of money because those are some of the roadblocks that the legislature put in place for these efforts. You have to pay signature gatherers for ballot initiatives and referendums. You have to pay them hourly. You can't pay them per signature. They put that in place after 3 ballot initiatives qualified for the ballot in 2018. Prop 4, which is the anti-gerrymandering, the medical cannabis bill, and the Medicaid expansion. And they also made the geographic requirements extremely hard. And now that they have to play by those rules, they're finding out just how hard these efforts are. And it's even more impressive what the referendum organizers were able to do. And they did it for less money. I think they spent $2.7 million, with a large amount of that coming from the National Education Association. They put forward a bunch of the money to pay for a lot of the signature gathering efforts. But there was a coalition behind that one. Here, the repeal of Prop 4, it's one organization. It is one outside group called Securing American Greatness. I've talked about them before. They are a dark money group, a super PAC affiliated with President Donald Trump. But I've done some numbers. You can see it on my website, utahpolitics.news. They really need to have the rate of verification step up, and soon, if they're going to have a chance to get there. If they have, they're at their recent 5-day average, they'll fall short by about 100. They'll fall short by almost 20,000 signatures, and they'll only qualify in 6 districts. So they would miss the ballot. But even if they, at this pace right now, even if they get to that statewide total, my math shows that they'll probably qualify maybe 12 Senate districts, and that's 14 below what they need to. So they, again, would not qualify for the ballot. And time's a ticking. I mean, they're really running up against it. So that's your update on those numbers. UT County Dems says, could you please, I'm going back through some older comments. They said, could you please clarify that information I just joined so I missed the first part of that? I'm not sure what you're talking about. If you're still on the live, let me know and I'll try to answer your question. Elliot Nutter on TikTok says, I loved your Olivia Rodrigo reference. Yes, I used the clip from her song All American Bitch. I thought it was appropriate. The lyrics are, I pay attention to things most people ignore. That's why I've been doing this for so long. I am naturally suspicious of everything an elected official does. And when they make moves like that, it gets my attention because they're up to something. Something is happening that you need to pay attention to. It just comes with years of watching this stuff. It used to be that there were a lot more. There was a lot more chaos, especially on the House floor. The Democrats used to do this all the time, and they haven't done it for a long time. But they would sort of hijack a session on the House floor by trying to lift a bill from rules, and they usually do it for one of their bills that is stuck in rules. One of their bills that has no chance of passing, but the Republicans won't even let it go to a committee, right? And what they would do is they would make a motion to lift the bill from House rules and bring it directly to the floor for a debate, bypassing committee, because it would not get out of a committee. The Republicans wouldn't let it out of rules, and they wouldn't assign it to a committee, so it wasn't going to get a hearing. So they would try that at least once a session, and those were some pretty entertaining floor debates, because what they would do is Democrats would force the issue. They would force Republicans to have to justify why this bill should not be heard. And they were just making a point. That hasn't happened for a long time. It used to happen a lot. Remember when Dave Jones was the minority leader, he would do it. Ralph Becker was the minority leader, he would do that. And then it's kind of gone away. Looking at a couple of people are asking about the Trevor Lee bill to rename Harvey Milk Boulevard in Salt Lake City after Charlie Kirk, and whether it's getting any traction. The last I saw that bill is it's still sitting in rules. It's still sitting in the Rules Committee, awaiting assignment for. I'll double check that, but I think it's still in the Rules Committee. And we talked about this on our live on Monday night. But it's still in the Rules Committee. It hasn't been assigned yet. I believe, I'm not sure why it hasn't come out yet. It's not unusual. It was introduced on the first day, but they've got a big backlog now. And we're getting close. I mean, yeah, sure, we're only a week and a couple of days into the end of the session, but, time is going to start ticking, and it's going to be harder and harder to get bills out of that committee. I assume that it will come out at some point. But right now, let me double check this here. The status is it is still sitting in the House Rules Committee, so it's not doing anything yet. It's not going anywhere. I would expect that we'll probably see this a couple of weeks, maybe. I don't know. It's really hard to gauge with this current legislature. And I believe that Representative Lee is on the Rules Committee, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's on the House Rules Committee, so he's one of the Republicans there. So I would expect that he's probably being strategic about when this bill comes out. Roy City Slicker on Instagram says, does Republican leadership like when members run bills like the one affirming voting for citizens? They seem like a waste of time. I'm assuming you're talking about the citizenship requirements. There's a couple of bills that require proof of citizenship. I know that Senator Mike McKell has one. I know Representative Cory Malloy had one. And what they would do is they would create sort of a dual tier ballot system. Arizona does the same thing where if you have to show proof of citizenship if you want to vote in state level elections. If you don't show proof of citizenship when you register to vote, then you can only vote in federal elections, and you would get a ballot that's for federal elections only. And there have been some court cases. Like I said, Arizona tried to do this, and several courts have said Arizona cannot require proof of citizenship for federal elections. So they have a bifurcated ballot in Arizona, and Utah would be doing the same thing. To answer your question, this is something that Republican leadership is in on. They have embraced the myth that non-citizens are voting in Utah. I don't know if you saw it last week, but the Utah Elections Office they're doing an audit of the voter rolls to see if there are any non-citizens who have voted in Utah. They found one non-citizen who was registered to vote, but they never cast a ballot. And it's likely that registering to vote was an oversight or a clerical error. But that's not going to stop them from doing this. They want to, they're all in on requiring citizenship to vote. So this is a bill that's probably a priority. I've heard Speaker Schultz talk about this as something he wants to do. So I don't think they view it as a waste of time. Despite the fact that, there's no evidence that it's happening. And it's really funny because last year, Carrie Ann Lisenby, who at the time was the House Majority Whip, she tried to do the same thing. That bill didn't go anywhere. They actually killed it because she had angered some members of either the Senate. I think she angered some members of the Senate, and they weren't going to pass her bill, so it didn't go anywhere. But after the session, she came out with these fantastical stories about how a whistleblower had stepped forward and given her definitive proof that a non-citizen had registered to vote in Utah and actually cast ballots. She had the proof. I asked her, can you show me the proof? Nope, can't tell you. Well, she wouldn't answer my questions. But I do know election officials asked her to share that information with them. County clerks, they're like, hey, if you've got that proof, why don't you tell us so we can fix the problem? Nope, she wouldn't show them either. But she swears up and down that she has the proof of a whistleblower. Whistleblower told her. It was basically, trust me, bro. Trust me, bro, that non-citizens are voting in Utah elections. She also had something in that bill that I picked up on and caused a little bit of a stir when I wrote about it. But in that bill, she had a weird provision, and it was written in such a way that it would have opened up the state's voter rolls to a pretty prominent election conspiracy theorist who's peddling this stuff called quantum analysis or quantum fractal technology. Now, if you hear that phrase, a normal person's going to be like, I don't know what that means. I know what it means because I spend time in some of the weirdest and grossest places on the internet so I know where these conspiracy theories are coming from. But her bill had a provision specifically written for this one person, and it would have turned over the voter rolls to him. I also know that, and I reported, she met with this election conspiracy theorist whose technology was funded by the MyPillow guy. She had a meeting with him and Speaker Schultz, at the Capitol before she brought this bill out. I didn't see anybody else reporting on that. Because why? Again, to quote Olivia Rodrigo, I pay attention to things most people ignore. Because I've been doing this for a long time. Anyway, see if we have any other questions. Seraldi66 on YouTube. A number of questions. I'm going to take your most recent one here because it's kind of on the same topic. You said, thoughts on HB 302 government speech neutrality amendments that amends provisions related to the adoption of official and other local government flags, when and where certain flags can be displayed. We talked about this on Monday's live stream, but I'll bring it up again. This is a bill from Matt McPherson that sort of takes the fight over pride flags from last year to the next level. If you remember, Representative Trevor Lee had his bill HB 77 last year that banned the display of flags in classrooms and later expanded to include public buildings. And it had an official list of flags. Essentially, it was a pride flag ban. The original version of the bill basically made it so you could put the Nazi flag up as long as it was part of a curriculum. But it was a pride flag ban. And Trevor Lee admitted as such that he was tired that this bill, he had the votes in the Senate to get it through, because this bill, there were a lot of people who were tired of seeing pride flags all over the place in Salt Lake City during Pride Month. And so that bill passed. And then, as you remember, Salt Lake City saw the gigantic loophole and drove a truck through it, where they took a pride flag, a transgender awareness flag, and a Juneteenth flag and just put the city's symbol, the Sago Lily symbol on it, and adopted those as official flags. Well, this new bill, HB 302 from Matt McPherson, says cities and local governments can only have one official flag, and the legislature gets veto power over that flag. If a city wants to adopt an official flag, then a legislative committee has to sign off on it. Oh, and by the way, that legislative committee, which is the Rules Review and General Oversight Committee, the co-chair is Representative Trevor Lee. And they would get to have the veto power essentially on that. If you remember, Governor Spencer Cox called the whole fight stupid, but he let the bill go into effect without his signature. I expect that one to pass too. Didimau on TikTok says, super small government here, and then the sarcasm. Yeah. The joke, and I've said this before, but the joke that you hear all the time is that the legislature believes in local control until the locals need controlling, and then they're more than happy to step in and put the force of the state behind things. Roy City Slicker says, is the legislature denying you press credential because of personal beef, or does their supposed policy apply to all independent journalists? That's the thing, Roy City Slicker. This lawsuit has been ongoing for more than a year now. We are currently in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. We have filed our appeal. Yesterday, we filed a motion for an emergency injunction pending appeal that would force the legislature to give me a press credential while this appeal is ongoing. We filed that yesterday. The legislature's response is due on Monday. So I expect that there will be some sort of ruling on whether or not they will be forced to give me a press pass for the remainder of the session sometime next week. Fingers are crossed that they see that the Utah court here made an error when they dismissed the case, and they decide to give me an injunction pending appeal. We do have oral arguments in this case set for March 17th in Denver. And it's a 3-judge panel of the 10th Circuit is going to hear that. But back to your question. So we've been doing this for more than a year. At one point last year, I sat down for several hours for a sworn deposition in this case, under oath, answering questions from their lawyer. The representatives for the media in the Senate and in the House did the same thing. And the funny thing was, they could not define what a blog is. They could not define what makes up a blog, because they classify my website as a blog, and that's one of the reasons why they won't give me a press pass. But they can't define that. They also said that these media rules, these rules for the credentials, were meant to eliminate all discretion. It was supposed to put in place some hard and fast rules about who can have a press pass and who can't. If you are a blog, if you are independent media, you cannot have it. Well, the interesting thing is, last year they gave a press credential to an outlet here in Utah that covers real estate. They're called Building Salt Lake. I think they're great. I like them. This is nothing against Building Salt Lake. I think they are a quality product. They got a press pass. On their website, they describe themselves as one of the top real estate blogs in the country. But they got a press pass. Why? Well, there was more consideration given. But I thought that the policy was supposed to eliminate all discretion. You check these boxes, you can have a press pass. They're a blog. They don't check the box, they can't have one. But they did get one. They could not answer questions in which circumstances they would deny someone a press pass or give someone a press pass. When I applied this year, they denied me. I appealed that, and I said, please tell me specifically what I need to be able to do, what I need to correct. They didn't answer. They wouldn't tell me. So for some reason, I cannot qualify for a press pass, but they can't tell me why, or they won't explain why. So back to your question. You said, is it a personal beef, or does it apply to all independent journalists? Well, since I'm the only independent journalist that this seems to apply to, what's left? Personal beef. And that's our argument. Our argument is that their restrictions are viewpoint-based. They don't like my editorial slant. They don't like the way that I choose to report stories. And that's why they want to, and that's why they're denying me a press pass. One of the things they came up with after I filed my lawsuit, and that's one of the things that the legislature loves to do. They love to pass these laws, and then when they get sued, they come up with a rationalization afterward. They did it in the Prop 4 case. They did it in my case. One of the things that came up afterwards is, well, I don't have, there's nobody in my organization who has the power to fire me, which means I'm not a legitimate journalist. They're very, very fixated on the people who cover the legislature having someone in their organization who can fire them. That's kind of scary. That they need someone who they can jawbone into disciplining a reporter if that reporter displeases them. You should be alarmed by that. I don't think the legislature should be. I do not think that the government, and particularly this legislature, should be in the business of deciding who is and isn't a legitimate journalist. And not to toot my own horn, but I saw this coming years ago, and I've been trying to get the reporters on the Hill to form some sort of Capitol Hill like coalition or reporters bureau, that sort of thing, so that they can decide among themselves who should be getting a press credential. I suggest we do something like they do in Colorado. They do this in a lot of other states, but I suggest they do something in Colorado. In Colorado, they have the Capitol Hill Press Corps, and what they do is they submit a list of all the journalists who will be credentialed for the upcoming session. And if the House or the Senate has an objection, they have to explain why. But that objection doesn't automatically block someone. Takes the legislature out of it. Takes the government out of deciding who is and is not a journalist. I'm seeing some questions here. Dude Since 85 on TikTok says, is there a way for you to join the Associated Press as a freelancer? Well, then I wouldn't be an independent thing, right? And I'd be writing for them. I wouldn't be putting it on my own thing. I'm trying to build an independent news source. That's what I'm doing here. So I understand why you're saying that, but that just doesn't work with what I'm trying to build here, what I'm trying to do. My goal is I like being independent. I really do. I really like this because, as I said as I started, my website, it is funded entirely by my readers, people who become subscribers, people who become subscribers, and people who, hit up the tip jar. No corporations. I like to say no billionaires, but that's what I'm that's what I'm doing. And it makes it so that I can't makes it so I'm accountable to them, and I don't have to worry about pissing off a powerful person by something that I wrote. And I'm taking this seriously. I'm not just flying by the seat of my pants. I have media insurance. I have a $2 million policy in case someone decides to sue me over something I wrote. I mean, this is a legitimate business. So for some reason, they think that I'm not a legitimate member of the media. So anyway, we're waiting for the legislature to file their response to our emergency appeal. That's Monday. We can file an optional response. I'm expecting that we will, but I think since time's a ticking. The legislature ends on March 6th. That we should hear something next week, hopefully, about whether or not the court has stepped in and said that they have to issue me a press credential. And if that happens, it'll be really fascinating to see what the response is up on the Hill, because they do not want me in those press briefings. They do not want me to be able to ask questions at these press availabilities. And believe me, I have got a list of questions that have been piling up for a year and more. Oh, I've got a ton of them. And they is going to get asked. Someone says, I didn't know you had to put up malpractice insurance. It's actually a media policy. It's actually libel insurance. In case someone decides to sue me, because that's always a possibility. Okay, so let me see. Someone said, Roy City Slicker on Instagram says, based on your reporting, Republicans will not get their Prop 4 repeal on the ballot. What's their next move? Because there's always a next move. I don't know. Because if they do not qualify for the ballot, then the Prop 4 repeal is dead for the next 2 years. They cannot try this again until 2030. And they'll certainly have more time. if they decide to bring this back, but they can't try. They can't put it on the. They can't try to put it on the ballot in 2028. State law says there's a 2-year cooling off period, so they have to wait. And then I'm guessing that at that point they just have to hope for their court appeals. But again, we are running. Time is ticking. I haven't seen any notice that oral arguments or anything has been set at the Utah Supreme Court over this. Diddy Mao says, did you hear Governor Cox wants us to pray again for weather? Yes. I've been looking into this. There was a documentary about the Great Salt Lake that was unveiled at Sundance. And from what I understand, the documentary is really quite alarming. It says that we're getting very close to the point of no return on saving the Great Salt Lake. Governor Cox is in the documentary, and from what I've gathered, he does not come off very well in that. But he did show up for the premiere, and I heard that he got booed pretty lustily by the crowd. But yes, we are praying for rain again. If you remember the first time he did that and then John Oliver mocked him on his show, that really hurt Spencer Cox's feelings. It really did. Because when we did get a bunch of rain and snow, bunch of moisture, he basically took a victory lap the next year. Mentioned it all the time. Lita on TikTok says, I feel like the Democratic Party is quite small. Was there ever a time they had a bigger group? There was a time when 2 of our 3 members of Congress were Democrats. We had Wayne Owens and Karen Shepard in office at the same time. It's been a long time. I mean, the last time the Democrats had a statewide elected official was Attorney General Jan Graham. I think she was elected in 92, and that was the last time that happened. Maybe 96. One of those 2 years. I'll have to look that up. It's escaping me in the moment. That was the last statewide elected official the Democrats have had. Since then, it is... it's been all Republicans on the federal level. Republicans have had... this is a very large Republican supermajority in the House and in the Senate. I mean, this is one of the biggest we've had in a long time. A couple of years ago, they literally had to expand their caucus room because there were so many Republicans. I think the closest we've been in the last couple of decades... Right now, there are 14 Democrats in the legislature. I think they've been as high as 20, maybe 23. It's been a long time since the Republicans have not had a super majority. But there was a time that all of the high leaders in the LDS Church, they were all Democrats. John F. Kennedy came and spoke at the Tabernacle. Which was remarkable. I remember I actually went to the church archives and pulled the audio of that speech when I was working for a radio station here in town. And we played it, and it was a remarkable speech, and that was a remarkable thing that happened. Steve Merrill says, new plan, stack the courts, fast track all lawsuits against the legislature, sue themselves, and then overturn everything. Maybe. Maybe, possibly. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried that. That would not surprise me at all. That's actually pretty funny. On YouTube, Utah just bought the bankrupt U.S. Magnesium and will donate the water they used to siphon off the Great Salt Lake. Well, at least that water that's being siphoned off there is, I don't completely understand the entire mechanics of everything. I do know that one of the biggest problems we have in the state, one of the biggest water uses we have in the state is agriculture. And that is something that they don't want to talk about. And one of the biggest is alfalfa farmers. And Governor Cox doesn't want to talk about that because he himself is an alfalfa farmer. And alfalfa is a very water-intensive crop. That's not the only problem, but that is a large factor. I tried to ask him about this once a couple of years ago, and he did not appreciate that question. But these are hard choices that they don't seem ready to address. It's a lot easier to pray for rain, a lot easier to pray for moisture than to actually make the hard choices that would have an impact. Another question from YouTube. This is about HB 399. This is a Trevor Lee bill that dropped the other day. It's called Primary and Secondary Education Amendments. I've looked into this a little bit. It defines character and civic education and creates restraints on a local education agency regarding the use of character education. This is a piece of the DEI panic that we've had over the past few years. It's about the bill mentions the social emotional learning bugaboo, but essentially this is just more DEI panic. And it's coming from Representative Trevor Lee, which is completely unsurprising. Oh, let's see. What else did I want to talk about tonight? A lot of stuff going up on the Hill. We've been at this for about an hour. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be hanging out here with you guys. I like hanging out with you. I can usually go about an hour before my voice starts to give out. Probably should get some lozenges down here or something. But we've talked about the Prop 4 signatures and my math on that Supreme Court packing bill. I don't know if you saw it this morning, but I spent some time writing about HB 85 from Representative Lisa Shepard. On the surface, this bill sounds like a completely innocuous thing. Sounds like a good thing. Basically, it says that Utah officials cannot declare a state of emergency, quote, exclusively in response to an emergency declaration from international organizations like the United Nations or the World Health Organization, right? Okay. It's never happened. She admits that's never happened, but what if it did? Well, this would be a safeguard for the state. But if you spend time in places on the internet like I do, you know that this is nothing more than conspiracy theory being turned into public policy. Being turned into state policy. It is a right-wing fringe conspiracy theory about something called the Great Reset. There is a reason why her bill mentions specifically the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the World Health Organization. Okay? And if you're unaware of what the Great Reset is, it came out of the COVID pandemic, and it is a theory, it is the belief that a shadowy cabal of elites are somehow manufacturing these crises in order to install a totalitarian one-world government and enslave humanity. That's what they are worried about. And so that's what this bill is trying to, that is the genesis of this bill. She tried to run the same thing last year and it made it through the House, but didn't go anywhere in the Senate. And it was so funny if you listen to the committee hearing where this came up. Representative Jordan Tusher actually asked Shepard, he said, why does your bill mention these three organizations? Why does it specifically single out the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and the World Economic Forum? All three of those are huge boogeymen on the far right. And she said, well, I don't know. I thought that that was already in the state code. I thought that that was already there. It wasn't. It was new language. It's in her bill and it's in red, so it's new language. When Tusher pointed out that it was new language, she tried to blame staff. She goes, I thought that came from another place in the documents. I'll actually have to see on that one because my understanding is it did come from somewhere. Well, it came from somewhere. It came from you because this is a conspiracy theory on the far right, and they want to do that. That's not the only conspiracy bill up there. Senator Ron Winterton, he tried this last year. It didn't pass, but he's got a bill about chemtrails. You know, when you look up in the sky and you see a jet and it's got those contrails behind him, which is condensation, because I've been in a high school science class and I understand how that works. I've been in the same room as a book before. But not to them. They think that when they see it, when they look up in the sky and you see a plane with these contrails behind them, they're actually spraying chemicals. Some people think it's for mind control. His bill is about geoengineering, which is weather manipulation to stop global warming. But it's toxic chemicals, and we're going to stop that. It was so funny. His bill last year, I haven't read the whole thing of his bill this year, but his bill last year set up a hotline where people could call in and report a plane that had these contrails, and it was a hotline to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General was going to have to investigate. It's so stupid. I'm sorry, but it's stupid. It's just such a dumb idea. But they were going to put up people were very worked up about this bill. Christy on TikTok says that would be so fun to call the number. Yeah, you think that number would ever get a single legitimate call? I'm sorry. That just amuses me. Just the thought of the people who are calling in. That happened this week. Utahns for Representative Government. That's the organization that's, I'm sorry, I'm a little punchy and tired, but that's a group that is running this Prop 4 repeal. On their website, which is ufrg.org, you can go and on the calendar section, you can RSVP to show up and sign the petition. But they left it open to where you can see who has RSVP'd. So I started going through some of the names, and it is some of the most junior high stuff, but it was so funny because like they didn't anticipate this was going to happen. I put some screenshots up on my social media. A person named Hugh Jass RSVP'd, Ben Dover. I mean, it's not particularly clever. It's very juvenile humor. But the fact that nobody anticipated that this was going to happen. And it probably got worse today after I pointed it out. Isabel on TikTok says they might as well mandate people wear tinfoil hats. If they thought they could get that bill through the legislature, I would not be surprised to see it. Seraldi66 on YouTube says, so when the WHO declares a bird flu pandemic, Utah's hands will be tied and will suffer and worse. Well, first of all, the United States has already withdrawn from the World Health Organization. So we need to worry about, doctors and scientists stepping in and telling us that there's a pandemic out there because we're not going to listen to that crap anymore. But yes, what the bill says is they cannot implement an emergency specifically based on one of these organizations. She's trying to set up a system where it will be, you go through the normal process. You go through the normal government process. You can't just mandate an emergency because the World Health Organization or someone says that there's an emergency, right? The problem is that you inject politics into that, and then the legislature gets involved and they do what they're going to do anyway. If you will remember, after the COVID pandemic, the legislature put all sorts of restrictions in place to try to stop these things, to try to make it very hard to put a mask mandate in place. They took it out of the hands of local mayors. They took it out of the hands and put it in the hands of county health organizations. And then when Salt Lake County and I believe Summit County, when their health directors decided that, hey, COVID numbers are up, maybe we should have a mask mandate for a month. So it passed, and the Salt Lake County Council, the Republicans, there weren't enough Republicans on the county council at the time to override that mask mandate. So then the legislature stepped in, and they voted to override it, with most of the votes coming from outside of Salt Lake County. Again, local control until the locals need controlling. I could see exactly the same kind of thing happening here. Karen Crosley on Facebook says, could you please explain again why you do not believe that a newly packed court would be able to hear the Prop 4 arguments? It's because we're running up against the calendar. I do expect this bill to expand the Supreme Court to pass on Friday. That's what the calendar is working out to be, unless they decide to take it up tomorrow. But I expect that we'll see the final vote in the House on Friday. It passed out of a committee, the House committee today. It faces one more vote in the House. That will probably be Friday because it will be reported to the House tomorrow. And under House rules, it has to sit on the House third reading calendar for 24 hours before they can take it up. Now, they could always suspend the rules and consider it earlier, but I expect, unless they do that, and I don't think there's a high probability that they'll do that, but I expect that they will take the final vote on Friday. And then it'll pass with 2/3 in the House. It already passed with 2/3 in the Senate. That means it will become law, effective when the governor signs it. We don't have the funding for these new justices in place, and first of all. So I don't know how they pay for it unless they just decide to include it in the budget down the line. That's the first hurdle. The second thing is, they would need to have these justices nominated, because I still think, unless the bill changed that, and I can't see where in the bill that would change that, I still believe that that would be the Judicial Nominating Commission. So they would have to put forward names, and then the governor would have to select two of them, and then you have to have a hearing, a confirmation hearing, and then a confirmation vote in the Senate. That's a process that, it'll take more than a couple of weeks. And the deadline we're working against is March 9th. That is the day that congressional candidates can start officially filing to run for Congress. So it's really hard for me to see, especially since we are now at the end of January, and we've got essentially the month of February to fight all of this out. It's really hard for me to see how they're going to get two new justices in place to hear the congressional map appeal. Maybe, but it really feels like the timeline is so compact right now. I could be wrong. I'm usually not, but I could be wrong. And I think that it's going to be very hard for them to get these two new justices in place in time to hear this appeal. To get them to override this new map. Because once the candidates start officially filing, then I don't see how they could change the maps again, because then that would open up another lawsuit, right? Because the candidates have to know where they're running. Now, this is not out of the realm of possibilities. Could the legislature once again push back that filing date? Could they push back the primary election? Yeah, they could. They did it. They did it with the general election after Chris Stewart stepped down. They messed with the election calendar that entire year so they could make sure that they could get everything fit in so they could get Chris Stewart's replacement in place as soon as possible. So they could move the dates again. But as it stands right now, the date is March 9th. That is the date that congressional candidates can officially file for to run for Congress. That is when the filing period opens. The Utah State Republican and Democratic State Party conventions, the nominating conventions, are on April 25th. That's 87 days from now. That is when a bunch of these nominations are going to be decided. Do you make them move their conventions? Because that's what would have to happen if you move the primary, or you move the filing date back. You'd probably have to move their conventions because there's all these county conventions that come before that. The primary election is on June 23rd. They could easily move that primary election back to September. I don't think that would be a problem. It just depends on what they want to do. Steve Merrill says 39 days to March 9th, 12 are on the weekend. The court would need new appointments, hearings, and a ruling in 27 working days. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, the weekends are not a part of this. It's 27 working days until candidates can start filing. Like I said, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that the legislature could move the dates again. I'm sure that they would have the votes to do it. But if they move the dates again, if I were one of these Democratic candidates, I'd file a lawsuit over this. Because it's making it uncertain for how you actually run for these seats. It messes with your fundraising, it messes with your organization, it messes with all this stuff. You're putting, and essentially what it's doing is it's putting the Democratic candidates at a severe disadvantage. It feels like they would just be opening themselves up to yet another lawsuit. And we wouldn't have this constitutional court in place yet, which, the new court that they want to, that they are about to create to hear these arguments. At least that's how I see it right now. So I think it's going to be very hard. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just think it's very hard. Oh, wow. We've been on for almost an hour and a half now. This has been a lot of fun. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for surfing in. Thank you so much for your questions, your comments. I'm going to be doing this quite a bit during the session. The best way to find out when I'm going to be doing this, because I'm moving the times around, trying to experiment for what's best for everyone. It feels like later in the evening is better for everyone. The best way to find out is to sign up for my newsletter, and you'll see it right here, utahpolitics.news, or if you're on the vertical, it's right here. It's free. You can sign up for my newsletter for free. I send out an email blast saying, hey, we're doing a live tonight at this time, and it's got links to all the platforms. I'm on Blue Sky. Yes, I'm on Blue Sky. You'll find me there at Shot Happens. You'll find me pretty much on every platform at Shot Happens. Don't look for me on X. I don't post there. Little too Nazi for me over there. But everywhere else, Shot Happens or Utah Political Watch. That's the easiest way. You can sign up for my newsletter. It's free. If you appreciate what I do, this is my sales pitch now, and I'm going to show you something really cool. If you were here earlier, you saw it. If you appreciate what I do, you can become a paying subscriber. It's $5 a month or $55 for a year. If you do that, you get some subscriber-only articles. We do subscriber-only chat, video chats like this, where you get a secret link, and then we get to talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's like office hours, and that's a lot of fun. You get to ask me whatever you want. $5 a month. You can also join our Discord. We had Nathan Detroit watching on Twitch earlier. He's one of our subscribers. He's on the Discord. We had a really interesting discussion the other day about the process for this Supreme Court packing bill. You'll get access to that. And I just got these in. I'm pretty excited about them. This is a limited edition, sending them out to subscribers who ask for them. But is this laptop sticker that says corporate media sucks, support independent journalism. That's a pretty good gimme for subscribers who want them. And if you are a subscriber and you want one, send me an email and I will pop it in the mail for you. But that's what allows me to keep doing this, is my subscribers, people who throw money in the tip jar. I appreciate everyone giving me words of encouragement, saying that they appreciate what I do. I appreciate you watching, because without you, without people watching, people who are interested in what I have to say, me explaining what it is, then there's no point in doing this. But I really think that we are in a moment in this country where you need to be informed about what your government is doing. I hear people say, I don't do politics. Grow up, do politics. You need to do politics. Karen Crossley says, thank you very much. I really appreciate your insight. I donated and signed up for your newsletter. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that very, very much. Reasonable on TikTok says, I'm new to Utah. How do I even keep up with the legislative session? Right here. Subscribe to my newsletter. I know the people on YouTube can't see what I'm doing here, but there's another graphic on that feed. I'm running two feeds, one horizontal and one vertical. That's one way. Find people you trust on social media. I actually have a feed on Blue Sky for Utah news. That's I try to curate the Utah news reporters. That's a good way to keep up with it as well. That's going to do it for me tonight. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for joining. If you have any questions, if there's something you want me to talk about, you can send me a DM on any of these platforms, or you can send me an email. Feel free to do that. Oh, Powski, okay. Now I can't wrap up because Powski on Instagram just asked a very interesting question. Is there any chance the Democrats could take 2 congressional districts in November if they play it right? Not under the map that's in place right now, okay? Not under the map that the judge put in place. You've got one D+14 map, and you've got one D+14 district in Salt Lake County, and then the other 3 districts are like R+30 or more. So the Democrats would not win in those other 3 districts. But if the legislature gets that map thrown out and they get the map that they passed, which is known as Option C, I have had a lot of Republicans who have worked on congressional candidates. They are terrified about that map because you have 2 districts that split Salt Lake County. One is the west side of Salt Lake County and Tooele County. The other one is the east half of Salt Lake County, and then it goes out east to the border and then down south. Those districts voted for, those districts both voted for Donald Trump in 2020 and 2024, but not by much. One of them was like Trump +6. The other one was Trump +1. And what it looks like right now, and this is my caveat, what the conditions today may not be the conditions when we get to November for the election. But as it stands today, there's a lot of time between now and November, but as it stands today, it is looking like a wave election for Democrats. Did you see what happened in Minnesota last night? They had a special election for a legislative seat. It was a solid Democratic seat. Kamala Harris carried the seat by 71 points in 2024. That seat went for the Democrat by 96.5%. The Democrat got 96.5% in that race. That was remarkable, and that should set off alarm bells everywhere for Republicans, because that screams Democratic wave coming. That's what a wave looks like. And when you get a wave election, then seats that are R+6 and R+1, like we would see under the Republicans' map, those flip. Those flip. Think back to 2018 when Ben McAdams was elected to Congress from Utah as a Democrat. He was running in an I want to say R+12, R+14 seat. That was a reach. Okay, that is a solid Republican seat. It's what you call a reach seat. But when you get a wave election, if the wave is big enough, then those R+14 seats flip. And that's what happened. That R+14 seat flipped. It flipped by less than 1,000 votes, but it flipped. That's what happens in wave elections. So if option C gets put in place, depending on who the candidates are and who gets nominated, there is a very real possibility that if we see a Democratic wave in November, Democrats could pick up 2 seats. That, to me, is the only way that they would be able to do this. I do not see them picking up 2 seats under the map that's in place now, which is the one the judge put in place. I do not see them picking up, maybe possibly getting 1 seat if the 2021 map gets in there. So, Powski903 on Instagram says, do we actually want that map C then? These are wild times. I feel like anything can happen. I don't know. I just know that Republicans have said that the legislature should be thanking Judge Gibson for saving them from themselves with that map, because there are Republicans who, these are strategists who work on Republican campaigns in the state, congressional campaigns, and they looked at that map C and they were like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That is a disaster brewing. So anyway, that's going to do it for me tonight, okay? My voice is about gone. I've been talking for an hour and a half, and I'm about finished. I will if you miss any part of this, I will put it up as a podcast tomorrow. It'll also be on YouTube. I edit some stuff out, but it'll be on YouTube. It'll be available on a podcast. You can also watch the replay on YouTube, on Facebook. It's all there. But I'll put that up for you. You can subscribe to my newsletter if you want to know the next time that we're doing this. We might do one tomorrow. We might do one Friday. Who knows? If you want to know the time and the date, sign up for my newsletter. It's free. I send out a news blast on that. If you want to support what I do as an independent journalist, I'm not owned by corporations. I'm supported by my readers. If you want to support what I do, you can become a paid subscriber, or you can throw some money in the tip jar. All of that contributes to letting me commit acts of journalism like this. But I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This has been fun. Stay safe, everybody. Listen to the new Bruce Springsteen song that he put out today. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. Of course I am. I'm a white man in my 50s. I love Bruce Springsteen, but he dropped a song today called Streets of Minneapolis that is incredible. Do yourself a favor. Listen to it. He wrote it on Saturday, recorded it on Monday, and he released it today. Do yourself a favor. Listen to Bruce. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.